Classic album Saturday Bob Dylan Blood on the Tracks, 1975. Blood on the Tracks is the 15th studio album by American singer-songwriter Bob Dylan, released on January 20, 1975, by Columbia Records. The album marked Dylan's return to Columbia Records after a two-album stint with Asylum Records. Dylan began recording the album in New York City in September 1974. In December, shortly before Columbia was due to release the album, Dylan abruptly re-recorded much of the material in a studio in Minneapolis. The final album contains 5 tracks recorded in New York and 5 from Minneapolis. Critics often rank Blood on the Tracks as one of the greatest albums of all time. Blood on the Tracks initially received mixed reviews, but has subsequently been acclaimed as one of Dylan's greatest albums by both critics and fans. The songs have been linked to tensions in Dylan's personal life, including his estrangement from his then-wife Sarah. One of their children, Jacob Dylan, has described the songs as "my parents talking." In interviews, Dylan has denied that the songs on the album are autobiographical. The album reached number 1 on the Billboard 200 charts and number 4 on the UK Albums Chart, with the single Tangled Up in Blue peaking at number 31 on the Billboard Hot 100 Singles Chart. The album remains one of Dylan's best-selling studio releases, with a double platinum U.S. certification by the Recording Industry Association of America, RIAA. In 2015, it was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame. It was voted number 7 in the 3rd edition of Colin Larkin's book All-Time Top 1000 Albums, 2000. In 2003, the album was ranked number 16 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, rising to the number 9 spot in the 2020 revision of that same list. In 2004, it was placed at number 5 on Pitchfork's list of the top 100 albums of the 1970s. At the conclusion of his 1974 tour with the band, Dylan began a relationship with a Columbia Records employee, Ellen Bernstein, which Dylan biographer Clinton Heylin has described as the beginning of the end of Dylan's marriage to his wife Sarah. In spring 1974, Dylan was in New York for several weeks while he attended art classes with the painter Norman Rubin. Dylan subsequently gave Rubin credit in interviews for transforming his understanding of time, and during the summer of 1974 Dylan began to write a series of songs in a series of 3 small notebooks which used his new knowledge. Rabin taught me how to see, in a way that allowed me to do consciously what I unconsciously felt. When I started doing it, the first album I made was Blood on the Tracks. Everybody agrees that was pretty different, and what's different about it is there's a code in the lyrics, and also there's no sense of time. Dylan subsequently spent time with Bernstein on his farm in Minnesota, and there he completed the 17 songs from which Blood on the Tracks was formed, songs which Heylin has described as perhaps the finest collection of love songs of the 20th century, songs filled with the full spectrum of emotions a marriage on the rocks can engender. Before recording the songs that would constitute Blood on the Tracks, Dylan previewed them for a number of friends in the music world, including David Crosby, Graham Nash, Stephen Stills, Tim Drummond and Peter Rowan. Nash recalled that Stills disliked Dylan's private performance of his new songs. Immediately after Dylan left the room, Stills remarked to Nash, "He's a good songwriter, but he's no musician." Initially, Dylan considered recording Blood on the Tracks with an electric backing group, and contacted Mike Bloomfield, who had played lead guitar on Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited album. When the two met, Dylan ran through the songs he was planning to record, but he played them too quickly for Bloomfield to learn. Bloomfield later recalled the experience. "They all began to sound the same to me, they were all in the same key, they were all long. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life." He was sort of pissed off that I didn't pick it up. In the end, Dylan rejected the idea of recording the album with a band, and instead substituted stripped-down acoustic arrangements for all of his songs. On August 2, 1974, Dylan signed a contract with Columbia Records. After releasing his 2 previous albums, Planet Waves and Before the Flood, on Asylum Records, Dylan decided his new album would benefit from the commercial muscle of the record label that had made him famous, and his new contract gave him increased control over his own masters. Dylan commenced recording at A&R Recording Studios in New York City on September 16, 1974. Bernstein has stated the theme of returning ran through the sessions, so it made a lot of sense to do it at A&R. A&R Studios was the former Columbia Records Studio A, where Dylan had recorded 6 albums in the 1960s. The musicians quickly realized that Dylan was taking a spontaneous approach to recording. The session engineer, Phil Ramone, later said that Dylan transitioned from one song to another as if they were part of a medley. Ramone noted, "Sometimes he will have several bars, and in the next version, he will change his mind about how many bars there should be in between a verse, or eliminate a verse, or add a chorus when you don't expect." Eric Weisberg and his band, Deliverance, originally recruited as session men, were rejected after 2 days of recording because they could not keep up with Dylan's pace. Dylan retained bassist Tony Brown from the band, and soon added organist Paul Griffin, who had also worked on Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde, and steel guitarist Buddy Cage. After 10 days and 4 sessions with the current lineup, Dylan had finished recording and mixing, and, by November, had cut a test pressing of the album. Columbia began to prepare to release the album before Christmas. Dylan played the test pressing for his brother, David Zimmerman, who persuaded Dylan the album would not sell because the overall sound was too stark. Robert Christgau also heard the early version of the album and called it a sellout to the memory of Dylan's pre-electric period. At his brother's urging, Dylan agreed to re-record 5 of the album's songs in Sound 80 in Minneapolis, with backing musicians recruited by David. The new takes were accomplished in 2 days at the end of December, 1974. Blood on the Tracks was released into stores on January 20, 1975.